Welcome back to Best Kept Secrets, Stories of Hope and Survival. And I am Dawn Lede, your host with the Lifehouse Project. And we are here today with Mehreen, and she is going to share her amazing story of survival and hope. Welcome, Mehreen.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's our pleasure. So, Maureen, I wanted to start with a really amazing question that your therapist asked you um, about after everything you've gone through, how did you turn out the way you have?
Yes, I didn't have the answer when she first asked me this. And then when I really dug to see how I came out of all the trauma that I'd gone through and how did I come out, what I discovered is that I just always moved forward. I always looked forward, had an optimistic view. And fortunately, unfortunately, I would block those things out.
Mm,
So just block it out. And it's what I learned through therapy and everything. There's something about called the dissociative personality disorder or syndrome. And I may be saying it wrong, but it has something to do with your identity and where you start to create a different identity that works better for you. So you've got to get out of that mode of trauma and victimized to really create the life that you really want. And that's what I just did. I didn't even realize I was doing it until the question was asked. And I started to realize that I almost was living like two lives. And so what I started to work on was how to bring both those lives back together and really live authentically so I can tell my story, so I can move forward and bring all of it and basically be the whole of me that I am today.
yeah, you mentioned, and we'll get to that, what happened, but you mentioned there was a Marine before your mom passed away and a Marine after.
Yes.
Talk about that.
Yeah, the Marine before my mom passed away, um, didn't really get it. Was just kind of going through the emotions and creating and doing and controlling and making things just work, but not really getting the whole picture of what where my life came from and where it is that I really wanted to go. It was just going through the emotions.
Mm,
And after the Marine, after my mom died, was awakened, but it was a scary awakening because I was confronted, like it like hits you right in the face that all of these things happened. Everything happened in my childhood, and I never really dealt with it, and didn't I don't even think I realized that anything was really wrong. But now that I'm sitting at, I think, how old was I? About age 37. And no, 30, I was 36. So 35, 36 when my mom died. So I'm sitting there and I'm realizing I have my own life, my own marriage, my own children, and then but I would never treat them the way I was treated. Right. I
yeah,
would never, um, that's when I think it really, really hit that everything was so not normal growing up. And it needs to be talked about. I
yeah.
needed
You
to
said
talk
that
about it.
it sort of flooded in. It
It was, yeah.
overwhelmed you with the knowledge of what happened. So tell us about what happened.
So what happened is that my mother was bipolar schizoaffective. So growing up in a home with a mother who was dealing with mental illness and probably wasn't getting the right treatment. I mean, we're talking about 80s when my parents divorced in 86. So I was 8 years old and the eldest of my siblings. And, you can imagine that my like let's go back to my mother being an immigrant coming into the 70s as an immigrant, not knowing a word of English really, like maybe could say hi, hello, how are you, but not really understanding the culture of the US. And then me being born 9 months after she was married. So having to deal with all that on her own without the support of family. And
Mm,
then being flooded by all of her emotions, her mental illness that took over, and having to take care of the kids. So if you think about it, that was her life. That's what we were born into, and what we came to terms with. This was normal. We didn't know anything different. And I was told, as my dad, when he left, he, divorced my mom, and I was told that you're the eldest, you have to take care of everyone. So I just took care of everyone, didn't know anything different, but that's what I was told to do. And that's what my responsibility is as the eldest, daughter or child. And so that's what I just did. And that meant even taking care of my mother, because I thought that because of the divorce, she was in the situation that she was in. That's what we were kind of told. But really, it was her mental illness, all the mania she had, the abuse, the verbal abuse, the physical abuse. So all of those things that came in with that, you don't know any different, right? Because that is so, I mean, you hear people who grow up in abusive homes, they think that's normal because they don't know any different. So that's basically what we grew up into. And then, like I said, after waking up and realizing like, oh my God, that wasn't normal. Then it's a whole nother realm of, thoughts and meaning that you have in life that you want to either, how do I say, do you want to completely and just be with, you could either be victimized. Let me put it this way. You could be completely living in your life as victimized, as a victim of all of this abuse, or you can say, this happened. It was something that happened to me. It had nothing to do with me, and separate yourself and then be able to create the life that it is that you want. And you can actually decide if you want to carry it with you in the future or not. But it takes something. It's not something that people are just, that we know. We're not taught this in school. That's the thing, is like, we're not taught how to deal with the emotions, how to deal with the abuse. We end up just growing up in it, and it affects us. It affects us in our marriages. It affects us in our relationships. It affects us as parents. It affects in so many areas until we take ownership and really work on it. Yeah. So that's
and
really,
you also, so your mom, what did her illness look like for you as a child?
Yeah, so what it looked like was she was either in bed all the time, and we were told that she was depressed and sleeping. She may have been taking medication to sedate her, which we didn't know, right? So my grandparents are pretty much taking care of us and doing the best that they could, and taking care of our laundry, our own lunch, our breakfast. My grandparents would make sure that we would have dinner. They didn't live with us. They couldn't live with my mother because of my mother's violence, yet we still did. And when my mother would have the mania or her episodes, then we would be locked up in our room. We would lock ourselves up in the room so she wouldn't come and have her fits. It's difficult to talk about, right? Like, she's passed, and that it was a mental illness. It wasn't, what I do know now, it wasn't towards us. It was something that she couldn't control, unfortunately, and nobody really helped her at the level that she needed to be helped, unfortunately. So now I can say that, but at the time, I mean, even till before she died, I was very upset with her. I was like, Mom, what about us? You never cared about us. You never asked, like, how are we doing? And that was actually my last conversation with her before she died. And it was something I had to deal with, because that's not how I wanted her to. I hope that I carried that guilt, that those were my last things that I ever had a conversation about, was like blaming her and making her maybe feel guilty about herself for not being there for us. But she did the best that she could. She didn't get the help that she needed, bottom line. Yeah. And that's what I see that happens in a lot of homes.
So most of the physical abuse came from your mom?
My mother, my grandfather as well. I think his is anger related, maybe a control thing. I think when they were very emotional, like they would react very irrationally to anything that was out of their control, right? Like anything that was going on with a divorce, they would take it out on us. Financial stuff, they would take it out on us. Anything that would, I think, cause them, they just didn't know how to deal, and they would take it out on us. And I don't know, maybe it's something how they grew up. I have no idea. I never got to ask that question, but, and maybe I'm giving justification for it, but
Yeah. You seem to have a lot of compassion for your mom.
I do. I have a lot of compassion for her. For a long time, I was angry. A long time, I was angry with God, that why we had to go through what we went through. But now that I am where I am now, I have compassion for them, that I know it had nothing to do with my self-worth. I know now that I am lovable, I am good enough, and that they were just reacting to whatever circumstances that they had going on. We sit with, this is not fair. Why did this happen? I don't know. We'll never know why this happened, but I can choose if I want to carry that pain into my relationships or into my future, or I can have peace with it and create something new. And what I've committed my life to is doing the work that I need to do for myself so that I can put a stop to that generational pain or trauma that's come through, so that no longer hurts my children and my grandchildren, and we can create some kind of normalcy around it. And we can talk about it. We can talk about these things happen in homes and how to deal with it. If you're if my daughter, I have two daughters, if they're, God forbid, they are in a abusive verbal or physical relationship, or have encountered or know somebody, how do you deal with that? And we're not taught that. And that's been, one of the reasons my sisters and I created, or the nonprofit SEMA, Support, Embrace, Empower Mental Health Advocacy, is for people who are around someone dealing with mental illness, that how do you deal with it? How do you take care of yourself? And where do you seek help? There's a plenty of nonprofits that are helping the people that with mental illness, but how about the community around them, the family ecosystem that's around them? It takes a toll on them as well in their life.
Because at 8 years old, you were told you had to be in charge of your siblings, basically.
Yeah. If you think about it, it wasn't until maybe like a few years ago that I finally was like, I'm not in charge of them. I don't need to take care of them. I'm in my 40s, they're in their 40s or late 30s, and they're fully capable of taking care of themselves. But when that's been in my head for so many years, I felt like I was the responsible one. I had to take care of everyone. So, and that goes into my family, that goes into my workplace, that as a leader, it starts to happen. You just become that person that just takes care of everybody. And what starts to happen is you forget about yourself.
Yeah, because at some point you felt you were sort of seeking people to take care of you as a child, not finding that in the traditional sense of your parents.
Yeah.
And then you said you wouldn't even allow it because it meant it wasn't really safe and it felt weak.
Yeah. It's almost like a catch-22 with me, right? What happens is that I want someone to take care of me. I want to be taken care of, but on my terms, because if I let them too far in, there becomes this codependency. And this idea that I've created because of my childhood is that if I let them have too much control over me, then, basically, if I let them do too much for me, then they have control over me. If they have control over me, then I'm the weak one. And at some point in my life as a child, I decided that no one was going to ever tell me what to do or control me. So that as soon as I'm out of this situation, I'm not going to rely on anybody because I don't want to end up that way, you know? So when you start to make those up, you start to realize that the relationships you start to create are almost one-sided, like it's all on my terms because I want to control the situation, right? Because of the trauma I've gone through. So for me, it's always there. It's a constant work in progress. Even with my husband or even with my close friends, I let them know that, look, this is the thing about me. They're like, they'll even say, it doesn't look like you need any help because I just take care of it. And I'm like, well, I give that facade because I don't want to look like I'm weak. And I don't want to depend on you in that way. Because as soon as I depend on you that way, then I feel that I've lost control. So you sometimes will have to remind me that, Mehreen, let me do this for you because I want to, and you don't owe me anything in return. And I'm like, okay. So I actually communicate that so that I can hear it back and they can understand where I'm coming from. And my close friends and my husband, they all know that about me.
Yeah, that's really good.
Mhm.
It's nice to be able to let them know. Did that come out of therapy?
So the therapy did help. I will say that helped with the going back and looking at all the things that had happened in my life. What really changed for me was when I walked in and took the Landmark Forums. If for the listeners, if you haven't heard of it, it's called the Landmark Forum. That weekend and they don't even charge that much. In my opinion, it's life-changing if you really take it on. I almost walked out actually in the middle of it, but I was stopped and they said, this is the time when you're going to make that change. And they were right. I stayed through the weekend and it totally changed my outlook on life and who I was taking responsibility of, who I was being and who it is that I really want to be. And that I am really in control in the life that I create. And if I continued on the path that I was on, I probably would create a life of disruption and irrational way of being that was a learned behavior from my childhood, or I can choose a new way of being, which I have, and I can really start taking leadership of my life, responsibility of my life, and the people around me, and show up, letting go out, completing with the past, letting that go, and really show up as how I really, truly, authentically want to show up, and not carry the past with me anymore. It's very freeing. It's scary and it takes work. I'm not gonna lie. But once you get past that, it is so much freedom in my life.
Yeah. How did you come to terms with, and how would you suggest others um, who are dealing with this, these memories flooding in that you didn't remember this, and not knowing the why it happened to you?
Yeah. So it's very important to see a professional, therapist. And sometimes the first professional you meet isn't the one that's going to work for you. I went through 2 or 3 before I found the one that really worked for me, that aligned with understanding our culture that we come from. And later I found out that they had also gone through some similar things too. So after therapy and once we started connecting, she finally shared with me that she had gone through some very similar things. So you have to spend, for those of you who may be suffering and you want to find a way, you need to find a therapist. And it takes 2, 3 sessions. If it's not clicking, find another one. It's an interview process. You have to find someone that really works with you and it clicks. If it's not clicking, and there will be times they're going to tell you things that you don't want to hear, but take it with an open mind. Because a lot of times we close our mind because we don't want people to tell us how things need to be anymore. So you have to let that part of it go and hear it from a whole new way of hearing it, like totally different. It's difficult to explain, but that's how I can explain it the best that I can. And what I'll also say is sometimes your therapist who is working you through your past may not be the right therapist to help you with your relationships. So, for example, I had been working with one therapist for many years to work with the grievance and the trauma, and then I found another therapist to work with my couples counseling, basically my marriage. So it just made it didn't feel right anymore. And I went to another stage. So I went to somebody else that really worked on relationships more than trauma. Although it would all work together, but I needed something a little bit different. So
I think it's important that point to make that you're going to know what's best for you.
yeah,
And if you're not feeling it's right, listen to yourself.
yeah. In
It's okay
fact,
to interview.
I was saying that in fact, the therapist that I went to was referred to by my existing therapist. So my couple therapist was, so she was like, maybe you want to try somebody else. It's okay, I'll check it out. Let me see. It takes time. And, we feel like we're too busy to deal with it. You're never too busy to work on yourself. You have to make time. And these self-help books, how many self-help books do people read? And what I will say is it's not something that you should do by yourself. It's not something you should do by yourself. You should be with a professional. You should be with a community that can help you. And we feel like we have to do it all on our own. We really don't. And we really shouldn't. That's not how human beings are created.
Yeah. And we almost can't in some ways because we have blind spots to ourselves.
That
Yeah.
blind spots is the reason. You go to the bookstore and you'll see all these self-help books and everything. And I'm like, how many times have you read all these books and how much of it have you really applied? And did you have accountability to apply it? Yeah, sure. There may be some shift in the way you're thinking, but if you really want to make a difference, find a therapist, find a coach, find somebody that really aligns, that you align with, and you will find it if you ask, because people will know, or Facebook is always listening.
Yeah.
Like it'll pop up somehow. When you ask the world that you need something, it will show up.
We had a guest who said, when you're ready, the teacher will appear. And I think that's
Yeah.
true.
Yeah.
So
You have to
part
be
of
open and
your
willing.
work that you've done really has allowed you to maintain a relationship with your father.
Yes. So I had to do a lot of work on this, and this is really over the past couple of years that I've been able to come to terms, or not, I don't want to say come to terms, but really embracing my father and who he is, because there was a lot of blame, there was a lot of anger, there was a lot of, you coulda, shoulda, woulda, all that towards my father, and a lot of things that my mother suffering and then my father thriving, that built a lot of that resentment, right? So, and there was really nothing that my father could say or do that would ever change that, even though I would say that I just want him to admit this, or I want him to treat me like this. And I would say all the things that I wanted him to do. But once I let go that he's whole, perfect, complete as he is, and that really I don't need him to be in any other way, it's really within me. That's when I was able to feel my father's love, accept him for who he is, and have a more free relationship with him, where it's more open. I can explain to him where my feelings are coming from. It's I would not even say the feelings are current, they're in the past. Now I can just have an open relationship with him, and I'm not treated like that 8-year-old, and I'm treated like the 43-year-old I am now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And do you have like a connection? I know connection was really important to you.
Connection with my father?
Um, yes, and also with others. Like that you mentioned various levels of being able to connect to different parts of your life. Yeah.
Yeah, right. So one of the things that I've felt that I've struggled with is connection with my children, with my daughters. I didn't have a relationship with my mother, so I never really understood what that mother-daughter or mother-child relationship really should look like. And, when I hear people like they hang out with their moms or their mom did this and all this stuff, I really couldn't understand. You know what I mean? Like I don't have that, so I don't know. And I'm not the only one, right? There's people who've lost their parents or never had their parents around or whatever. So I'm not the only one. So I had to, with through therapy and really letting go of, oh, I don't know, so I don't know how. I didn't have it, so I don't know how. I've had to just create it, and it's a constant work in progress, right? My kids are teenagers, so there's different stages that they go through those. So it's not going to always look like how I want it to look like. And being okay with however it is, because if I say it has to look like a certain way, then I'm trying to control it again, right? I'm trying to control it. So I'm saying this to myself. I'm coaching myself right now. I have to look because my kids are upstairs and sometimes it's like, but they're being teenagers, right? And I sometimes ask them what they want from me. Literally, I ask them, I was like, what would you like? I want to connect with you all. What do you want from me? Sometimes they don't even know. I'm like, well, what would you like to do? Or what would you like to talk about? Or, and that's actually been really great because they are seeing that I'm trying.
Yeah.
And so if they don't know at that moment, when they do know, my daughter will come up and say, Mom, I just want to talk to you. I'm like, oh, okay, let's talk. Got it. So it's being that way.
Yeah. How does it feel that you're raising two girls who are now in their teens that weren't put in the position at 8 years old that you were?
You asked, how does it feel or?
Yeah, like how does it feel that you're raising them in obviously such a different way than what you grew up?
Yeah. I mean, I'm not gonna lie. There's times where I'm like, gosh, they just have it so good. Right? Sometimes but I will say that um in my home, we make sure the girls take responsibility of chores or whatnot, because I do believe that going into the real life, if they have these things down pat, like my friend and I were just talking about this today, if they don't know how to do their chores or how to take care of themselves, they're going to be facing a lot more going into the real world. At least if they have these things down, then they'll have the time and the energy to work on what they need to be working on, right? With whatever it is in their future life. So, and making sure that they understand their emotions, because one of the things that we didn't have was how to deal with our emotions. And so what I learned through therapy is I asked her, I was like, how do people know all this stuff? They said, well, their emotional well-being was nurtured from their childhood. But since your emotional well-being hadn't been nurtured as in a normal environment would have, that's why you're a little bit of a late bloomer in this area. So it's educating my children on that, on how to deal with their emotions. I've had them both screened for their mental wellness, what signs and symptoms to look for schizophrenia, because schizophrenia can be genetic, so that they know that if you have any of these signs or symptoms, then let us know and there's help to be done. So educating them is really, really important, not only for themselves, but even for their future if they have children and it gets passed down.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Now, you were roofied and raped in college.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you now do you talk to them about it? Do they know at this point? Is that something that you would talk about with them?
Yeah. So, when this Me Too movement came about, I think I posted it on my Facebook, that the Me Too. And my daughter actually saw it and she said, Mom, why'd you put that? I was like, well, me too. And she's like, well, what happened? And I thought she was old enough now to know. She's in high school. And I told her, what happened in college. And I didn't know what had actually happened until my adulthood when my therapist told me, oh, you were roofied. And I was like, what? Because at that time it was very new. We're talking about early 90s or mid 90s. It was very new at that time. And so I shared it with her and she was very sympathetic, like that it had happened. And then I told her, I said, you just have to be very careful. I said, all I can say is that you have to be careful. And I also told her that, God forbid, if anything like that was to ever happen, that she could always never to feel like she would have to hide that. Pray to God, nothing like that would ever happen to her. But if it should, I want her to know she doesn't have to hide it, that she should tell us right away and we'd never blame her. And I think that's really important for our daughters to know. I think this new generation that's growing up, they need to be able to stand up for themselves and be able to speak up. And parents need to be able to hear it and support no matter what. I know I didn't get that support that I needed. And so I want to make sure my daughters get it. And I've educated my husband on that as well. I was like, whatever they say, if they say they were attacked or whatever, you have to believe them. You have to believe them.
Well,
it's never their fault.
People wish that they had that advice, I know, and that people that they knew were there for them because you didn't have anyone to tell and you just dealt with it, is what you said.
Yeah, that's right, Dawn. So what happened was, as I was peeling the onion, right, of all the other things that were happening, what was really dug down in there was I never dealt with that incident, the rape incident. And I actually one morning my husband was like, I woke up just crying and he was like, what's wrong? And I actually was having dreams about it. I don't know what actually can't remember exactly what was surfacing it. And I was scared. I mean, he knew, but I never told him like the details, or I never really talked about it because I didn't want him to see me as disgusting. I didn't want him to see me as, touched or whatever. You know what I mean? I didn't want him to, I was ashamed. And he just was so comforting and said, I'm sorry that you have gone through this. And if there's anything you want to talk about with it, I said, I don't know if I can talk to you about it. I was like, I feel ashamed. He said, it has nothing to do with you, and he was like, something happened and whatever I can do. So I went to the therapist. I think I shared maybe a little bit of details about it. And I told him what I found out from the therapist, that I had been roofied and all this stuff. That's when I started to discover, after going back through and reliving it. Then I realized it really wasn't my fault. I've been living all this time, these years, blaming myself. Yeah, but it's really important to make sure that we're honest with ourselves. And, when you have the right relationship, the supporting relationship, opening up and sharing it with them too, so that they can see where you're coming from. I think that's really important.
Yeah. So it's like you seem to have created so much of what you didn't have for yourself, for your family, for your daughters. It's really beautiful.
I mean, Dawn, when I was a kid and going through all this, all I wanted was to have a family that loved me and have a beautiful home and be loved, and and have peace. And I have it. And I know that it's because I changed and I worked on myself to create it. And I'm very, very blessed. I'm really, really blessed. And thank you for reminding me, because not everybody gets that. But all I know is that it was painful and I had to go through the work. But I'm very, very blessed to have the family that I have
Yeah.
and that has supported me through it. And it wasn't easy for them too to see me go through what I've gone through, but I've been very open so that they understood what I'm going through and why I'm angry or why I need some space right now, so that they could understand that it's okay to ask for that space. Otherwise I don't want to be hurting them, you know?
Yeah, I think it's amazing. We're so blessed you're here to share your story because it's such a good example of creating this for yourself. It's something you really wanted. And then also the added gift you're giving your daughters and your family to share and speak out and create spaces for yourself as a loving way of being connected to others. I think that's so important.
Yeah.
So tell us, what are you doing now? What's next for Mehreen?
What's next for Mehreen? So I've been consulting with Kraft Heinz for 16 years. I'm still doing that. But on the last couple of years, I also created my own coaching company,
Mm,
and where I'm working with powerful leaders who are dealing with the overwhelm and frustration and whatnot. And so what they come to me with is they've created all this success. They feel overwhelmed and overworked. And usually when we dig deep and really get to know them, there's been some trauma in their past that
mm,
has them become these amazing high achievers. And they may not be major traumas, but there is something that happened, an incident that happened that has them become powerful women that they are now. And now they've created this, amazing successful life, but it's overtaken and they don't know who their identity is anymore. And so
mm,
that's what we work on, is getting them realigned with their clarity and their purpose, and how to manage all their teams and not have to be perfectionist and control everything.
mm.
So we really work on that, and so that they can create expansion in their life, with their family, with their community, and within their business. So that's who we work with, and that's
Yeah.
been really rewarding, to be a part of their lives and helping them become successful in their ambitions.
Well, I bet having you as their coach is super rewarding because you know it so well, this work. So
No, thank you.
great.
We're always learning.
Of course, of course. Is there anything else you'd like to add for us today?
Yeah, for any of the listeners that may be out there, they could, what I would say is, make sure you've got a community. You're not
Mm,
doing it alone. We talked about, the self-help is self-help, but there are therapists out there, licensed therapists out there. There are even, if you're not comfortable with a licensed therapist, then find a mentor, or I would say hire a coach even.
mm,
I did psychology and counseling. I didn't go into the masters of it, but I did turn into a coach. But I think, if you find someone that you align with, ask them for their help and invest in yourself to do it, because there is a way out. It's really important. So, um, intentions, making sure that you have a community that supports you is really, really important. If your energy is depleted by being, even if it's family members, then maybe it's time to, that don't align with your core values, then maybe it's time to put some boundaries. And you
mm.
can do that in a very respectful way. You don't have to just cut them off. There are ways that you can do that. So we help our the ladies who come work with us, we help them, how do you create those in a very respectful way, so no one's hurt, because
Yeah,
some
I
people
see
get
that
really
as
hurt.
well. And loving boundaries. You can create boundaries
Yes,
from and with love. Yeah.
yes, absolutely, absolutely.
Mehreen, we are so grateful to hear your story and all the beautiful things you're doing. If you want to hear more about Mehreen and her work, please visit goalsetcoach.com. and you can learn about an upcoming free masterclass even. So
Yes.
definitely check that out. And if you have a story you want to share with us, please email us at survivors@lifehouseproject.org and visit our website at lifehouseproject.org to learn more about what we're doing and how you can help. And I hope that you will tune in next time for another story of survival and hope on Best Kept Secrets. Thank you.